Hi, I'm Mike Brofman, and welcome to another installment of Song and Wine, Brooklyn Art Song Society series where we discuss our upcoming concerts over a glass of wine. I'm joined today by pianist extraordinaire Joel Harder,
Hi.
who is joining us for the fourth installment of our home series on Friday, February 7th. We will be exploring songs by Bartók, Kodály, and Janacek, because Joel will be performing a great piece, Diary of the One Who Disappeared by Janacek. Before we go any further, I want to give a shout out to Waterfront Wines, who have provided the drinks for our chat. They are located on 360 Furman Street in Brooklyn Heights, and they specialize on organic and all-natural wines. We have a Chilean red here, which we're going to give a taste right now.
Right. Cheers.
Cheers.
That's good.
It's really tasty.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. So, Janacek.
Yeah.
I find Janacek is one of those composers where there are plenty of composers who are like this, but Janacek in particular, you turn on the radio and Janacek's playing, you've never heard the piece before, you don't even know what it is, but you know it's Janacek.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe even more than even some more famous composers, because there's something about his style that's particularly distinct.
Yeah.
So my first question for you is, what do you think makes Janacek Janacek?
It's a good question. Yeah, I agree. He's like, even in the 20th century, which has full of distinct voices, musically, he's got one that really sticks out. For me, it's like a combination of the influence of folk music for him. I mean, he was like Bartók, he was a collector of folk music in Moravia, where he grew up in Eastern Czech Republic. I think that the modal flavor and also the speech patterns that kind of bled into his music making are in there. I also hear a little bit of like Russian influence in his music, like Mussorgsky, for example, I feel like. But those are kind of influences. I feel like what makes him distinct, I guess, is he uses really interesting use of kind of fragmentation and of repeated motives. For me, the repeated motives is something that I can really grab onto quickly. He'll find like a rhythmic motive and he gets almost obsessed with it sometimes and repeats it over and over. Sometimes he'll turn it into an ostinato, or he'll turn it into some sort of expressive tool that expresses an emotion of some kind. And it becomes quite powerful and distinct that way. So the way he uses motives for me is that's for me a distinct way of telling it's Janacek.
Yeah, definitely that repetition. I think that there's always a sense that the repetition isn't there in this sort of maybe postmodern minimalist idea where
Right.
it sort of like has a machine-like quality.
Right.
I think you hit that it always has something to do with obsession and this sort of emotional intensity.
Totally.
Which is a different thing. And he's a composer who I think, like you also mentioned, is obsessed with compression.
Yeah.
He often, the motives or the ideas are just like two notes, and
Yeah.
they're two quick notes too. They're like da 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 da.
Exactly, yeah.
That's a very like common thing for him. I think they tie into another thing you mentioned, which was language and the Czech language, because I think even more, he's not the first great Czech composer, because Dvorak was a generation before him, but Dvorak composes in a more Germanic way.
Yeah.
And even when he writes melody, it's sort of with an ear towards Germanic melodic writing.
Like Brahms or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is more specifically Czech, and those rhythms, I think, are a lot in the language.
Yeah, I feel somehow that, people like Smetana and Dvorak kind of lean to the west, and Janacek leans to the east.
The work you're doing specifically with Janacek is Diary of a One Who Vanished. And it's really a epic cycle.
It
It's the
is.
whole second half of the program, um, and so it's about 40 minutes long.
Yep.
And so I think it's a different experience because often we think of song as a miniature form, and it's not like performing a concerto or a solo recital. But this really, I think, mental endurance and large scale structure are important factors. So how do you think about that while you're preparing this work?
Well, I mean, I guess I'd sort of approach it like I would when I first learned something like Die Schöne Müllerin or Winterreise of Schubert, the bigger cycles of that. For me, what I did this time with the cycle, which is new to me, was I listened to it all the way through, just without anything, just sort of eyes closed with my headphones on, just to kind of get a sense of the whole piece as a unit and sort of how I experience it. Then I'll look at the score, listen to it again. I'll read through the text and the translation really carefully, so I find out what's happening, what's going on, and I start to see the relationship between the music and the text. And then as I start to actually learn it, I'll probably, from a pragmatic point of view, I'll look at the pieces pianistically that maybe are more challenging or trickier ensemble, and I'll start there. But I really try to avoid just starting at the beginning and learning through. That never usually works out very well because the end gets neglected or I do a lot of backwards learning, or I'll focus in on specific pieces and kind of do it that way. But it's a process. Like it takes. You have to sort of have a broad sense of how it's coming together and keep track of that as you learn it. Because, like you said, it's 22 songs in this case, so it's a lot. It's a lot of material to hold together.
Yeah, I think it's interesting of learning out of order. I definitely think there's an order linearly in a song cycle. Whenever I play a big song, I think there is definitely to me an order of like emotional weight.
Yeah.
That I think is another way of looking at it. Like take digitally, but there's definitely the songs that are like, like Ich Grühle nicht, and
Right.
and and the last song that are these sort of like emotional anchor points. And then there are definitely songs like some of the the earlier ones that are more transitional or more just like
Totally.
in between the bigger songs. And I do think it makes sense to sort of learn those big songs first so that when you learn the smaller songs, you kind of know what they're leading up to.
Exactly.
And that changes your interpretation. My final question for you is general, but I think also applies to this piece of the role of an accompanist. I usually interview singers on the show, but I like to have at least one fellow pianist
Yeah, sure.
a season. And how do you see your role in a work? What do you think makes it so that you feel like if you've done this, you're successful in a performance as an accompanist?
Like this particular work, for example, or anything?
Let's start with this work.
Okay. Well, I mean, my approach to, to use a kind of metaphor that I'm stealing from somebody, admittedly, but I think is really apt. I think of myself kind of as like a tailor, a musical tailor, and then I'm creating a kind of musical garment that fits over a singer and around a singer and helps them to look as good and sound as good as possible, kind of augmenting the things that are strong and diminishing the things that are weak, and creating like a bespoke kind of musical outfit to go around them. So that's like kind of my metaphorical approach to it. In the case of something big like this, I think I'm also a little bit the director as well, because I think I'm in charge of setting the scene, both in terms of tempo and in terms of mood. And usually it's the pianist that sort of bridges the gaps between the songs and paces things out. So I have a lot of the dramatic kind of pacing is my responsibility too. And so I have to be really aware of that in a big cycle.
Especially in this work.
Yeah.
I like to think a lot about, saying the things in a piece of music that either the singer can't say or shouldn't say in the music. And I think there's a lot of this in this song cycle in particular, and all the song cycles that I love. I feel like there's always a subtext going on in the piano part that is either adding to what's being said by the singer or in some cases just contradicting it.
Yeah, sure.
And I always love to play up those elements. And this in particular, I feel like this whole song cycle, sometimes the texts or the poetry's not masterful, let us say.
Yeah, it's probably not a masterpiece on its own.
And sometimes the text is a little just straightforward, I'm a peasant boy and I'm
Here are my oxen.
Yeah.
And, they're pulling the plow kind of thing.
And to me, what the piano part is constantly providing is the psychology, what's going on in his head.
Right.
Which is either not at all what's literally happening. For example, he's just plowing the field, and there's oxen, but all he's thinking about is this gypsy girl.
Right. It's the thumping of his heart in the background, or something underneath that's just kind of making him anxious or driving him to meet her. And
so I'm always the most interested in those things because I feel like that's always sort of musically what the pianist has to offer. That's the one thing I can do that's to me a step beyond just the sort of bare minimum of being with the singer and helping their breath and making them sound pretty.
Right.
That's where our artistry to me comes from.
Something unique to offer that maybe a singer can't, because they have so many other things that they're offering already. Yeah, that's true. Whenever I play a song, songs of Wolf or Schoenberg or those expressionist late romantics, that's where you start to feel the subconscious coming into the piano part, and that's really fun. I love that, having responsibility for that.
I'm almost out of wine, so I think that's a good place.
Great, as am I.
To plug our concert. So this is the fourth installment of Home, featuring songs by Bartók, Kodály, and Janacek. Friday, February 7th at the Brooklyn Historical Society. You can get tickets in the little link below. Also on this concert, soprano Lucy Fitzgibbon, mezzo-soprano Kate Maroney, and myself on piano. And of course, Dominic Armstrong is the tenor for our work, joined by the little female chorus is Caitlin Mead and Allison Gish. Also, Lucy's joining in for the fun for that again.
Kafka.
So we hope to see you at the concert. Thanks for watching.